FPL Game Week 5 transfer plans. Game Week 4 has just drawn to a close and it is one of the game weeks for the history books of FPL. We'll talk about that, but today we're going to have a look at my first lineup going into Game Week 5. Is João Pedro going to be back for the next fixture, having not featured at all in Game Week 4? What transfer might I do, and actually should I just be playing the wildcard over the next few weeks? What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. And Game Week 4. Before we talk about Game Week 5, yeah, Game Week 4 went as Game Week 4 has gone. I'm recording before the Newcastle Wolves game this evening because I sold Alexander Isak, and practically everything that could have gone wrong this week for me has, apart from two players. So Erling Haaland came in with a couple of goals and Smith Rowe got an assist and a bonus point. Outside of that, pretty much every single thing in my team has gone wrong. I benched Gabriel in favour of Porro in favour of Robinson for his 15-point return. I brought in João Pedro and Salah for my two free transfers for Bukayo Saka, who got an assist, and of course for Alexander Isak, which at the time of recording, I don't know what happens in that game. I can't wait until that is over, because if he does well, we might not be having a video tonight. Of course we would. But yeah, I've had all my players play and it's been a horror show of a game week. Started about 200k. Before Isak playing, I'm about 400k, I think. Maybe 350, 400k. So I've about doubled my rank. Haven't quite dropped down to where I was last week. But if Isaac does anything today, it will be, yeah, outside the top 1 million is a very realistic possibility. So not a good game week at all. And it's starting to make me question quite a lot of players in my team. Now, I don't want to be massively too reactive about using my transfers and about wildcard, but I have spoken quite a lot about that game week 6 or 7 wildcard. And I think today's results have highlighted that that is probably the way that I need to go. There are enough things in my team now that I look at that I would want to fix on that game week 6 wildcard. Talking in goal, with Henderson and Matthews, I basically feel like with the Crystal Palace defence, I'm playing with 10 players every week, letting in stupid goals, not defending well, a lot of individual errors in that team, and Henderson as well, not covering himself in glory. To be honest, there's not loads of defenders I look at that I really like, but it would probably be David Raya or maybe Flecken that I look to go with on wildcard. I want a goalkeeper that I feel like I can get some returns from. Maybe Raya is just the obvious way. In defence, Trent was unlucky. Of course, he's been good for me so far this season. So is Porro, but I do look at Porro and think they're never going to keep clean sheets if they defend set pieces the way they did against Arsenal. Never bench Gabriel, although he's actually on my bench again, probably for the final time ever in Game Week 5 going up against Manchester City. Johnson, of course, isn't playing for Ipswich, so I don't have that fifth defender option. Robinson has been absolutely fine, but the Fulham fixtures are starting to look pretty poor over the next few weeks. Same thing with Smith Rowe. Smith Rowe with a goal and assist so far this season is absolutely fine for a player at his price. But again, the fixtures aren't that great going forward. Liverpool have a great fixture this week, and I do still plan on captaining Salah at home to Bournemouth, despite Bournemouth being pretty good recently. Jota not massively involved and came off just before the 60th minute. Again, another thing that went wrong this week. Salah for me as well. Bournemouth at home, he is likely to be my captain. Didn't do anything this week, but do I want him long term? He's still a long term buy. I'm not going to be too reactionary on Liverpool. Still been impressed with them this season. Then you've got Eze. Eze didn't take the penalty for Crystal Palace, and it sounds like they're going to share penalties, which is far from ideal. That's part of the real boost that you want when you buy Eze, is that he's going to be on penalties would they get one. And if he'd have got that penalty, the game week probably would have looked a little bit different. Morgan Rogers, who's currently on my bench this week as well, he's looking very good if you watch the games, but in terms of actual output, it hasn't been there. He's had 0 returns so far this season. Up front, we've got Haaland. We've got Chris Wood, who I bench, who's going to come in as my auto sub for João Pedro. And then, of course, we don't even know when João Pedro is going to be back. It does sound like he should be back for the Forest game. So in terms of this week and my lineup, it is at the moment Rogers on the bench. I could start him because he does have a good fixture. And if João Pedro misses out, absolutely fine for him to come in off the bench. Then we're going to go and bring Gabriel in from game week sort of 6 or 7 onwards. But I do still plan on benching him going away to Manchester City. I know his aerial threat is really good. And part of me might start him over Robinson. Trent and Porro are going to start with their nice home fixtures. But maybe I leave Gabriel on the bench for one more week in probably the hardest fixture they have all season away at Manchester City. So I need to try and not be too reactionary because it has been a pretty much a disaster game week. I am interested to hear if anyone has had a worse game week. Of course, if you didn't go with Erling Haaland, then you probably have had a lower score. I think I'm on 49 points for the game week. And looking at some of the others, if you've got anything more than 2 returns, you've probably done okay. But again, I'm talking before Alexander Isak has maybe scored a goal or 2 or 3 this evening. So let's see what happens in that Newcastle game. But of course, I've got no one in there. So I am rambling a little bit. I am coming off the back of a very bad game week. I'm not loving my lineup. I'm not loving my team for the long term. A lot of fixture swings coming. I am looking at Arsenal and thinking maybe I shouldn't have sold them. Of course, they've got Man City this week, but I do look like I need them back and probably just want to double up on them defensively. Smith Rowe is fine, but the fixtures are not looking great. Eze is questionable. João Pedro's looks like a big mistake because of the injury. Rodgers isn't returning points. Chris Wood as well. Pretty mixed on him as well. So at the moment, I don't have a massive transfer I plan on making this week because even if João Pedro was out, I probably would just play Rodgers in off my bench who does have Wolves at home. That's the other thing with the ability to roll transfers through a wildcard. So if I don't use my transfer this week and wildcard in game week 6, I can carry those transfers through the wildcard, which I don't actually love. It kind of negates the point of taking a 1 week punt before playing your wildcard, which was part of the fun of playing FPL, buying a player for 1 week before playing your wildcard and not having to worry about them for the long term. So that's a bit of a shame, but I do plan on rolling my transfer this week because even if I wildcard or I don't wildcard in game week 6, I do think 2 free transfers going into that with the Arsenal fixture swing, with the Brentford fixture swing and the Bournemouth fixture swing. I will probably want 2 transfers in game week 6 if I don't wildcard anyway. So just to answer a few of the questions, first of all is what to do with João Pedro. I would probably hold on to him. It does sound like they just didn't want to take a risk with him against Ipswich. And of course they didn't score. So they do kind of need him. He is a creative force and he is good going forward and scoring goals as well. I wouldn't worry too much about João Pedro. I am expecting him back for the Nottingham Forest home game. I do plan on starting him. Next up is Eze of Crystal Palace. What to do with him, especially now he's not on pens. Now, what it actually sounds like is they're going to share pens and they have 2 players they are happy to take penalties. That is Mateta and that is Eze. But once a player takes one and scores it, it's very difficult to see Eze taking any more penalties until Mateta maybe misses one. And then we might see Eze take one. And that's unlikely to happen anytime soon. I don't think Eze's a priority sell because if you watch the game, he was still involved. He still had chances. He still could have got assists and nearly scored a goal as well. But it does definitely dampen his appeal and make Mateta a better option. On wildcard in game week 6, I'm now not certain I'll go with him, but he's not a sell if you're not on wildcard. The final one is, do we give up on Morgan Rodgers? Again, he's very cheap. No one really in that 5 million price bracket is performing that well. If you have 0.5 to go up to someone like a Semenyo or Minte, then it's probably worth it. But I don't think there are any other 5 million options that I like better that have good fixtures over the next few weeks as well. And he is still very involved in what Aston Villa are doing. So João Pedro and Eze are still keeps for me. Rodgers is probably a keep as well. Yes, they didn't perform well this week, but I think a little bit of patience on these 3. So a little bit of reactionary knee-jerk opinions, and I know it's not been a good game week. I do plan on rolling my transfer in game week 5, despite having an awful game week. The only real things I have, of course, is a benching decision. Do I play Gabriel over playing a Robinson because they both have difficult fixtures? Do I start Morgan Rodgers over any of my front 7 at the moment? Or even if João Pedro is not going to be available, do we start Morgan Rodgers? Salary is going to get the captain armband for me. As I say, Trent at the moment has the vice captain. I don't hate it. A lot of home fixtures for me this week. Chris Wood, the only one going away from home, and it is Brighton, which isn't the best. They've been pretty solid this season, but I have also been impressed by Chris Wood and Nottingham Forest. So the plan is to roll the transfer, and then actually I'm going to spend a lot of this week looking at that game week 6 wildcard, because if I do decide to play a wildcard in game week 6, I need to know that as soon as the deadline passes for game week 5, because I don't want to be waiting midweek, losing price changes, players going up and down and things like that, and then deciding late on. If I'm going to wildcard in game week 6, I need to know by the game week 5 deadline pretty much. So although it's a roller transfer for me this week, most likely, even if João Pedro's out, I am going to be doing a lot of future planning, looking at a game week 6 wildcard. So as soon as that deadline does pass, I know what I'm going to do. I would say the probability of me wildcarding is now at 70%, a 10% chance I wildcard in game week 7 because my team for game week 6 actually looks okay. And then a 20% chance I save it until about game week 12 and maybe take a -4 next week going into game week 5 or game week 6. But yeah, at the moment, I do plan on wildcarding game week 6 and rolling my transfer this week. I know you've all got a lot of questions about your team, what to do with a lot of your players. drop it all in the comments section down below. I will do my best to answer all of those. And of course, the questions asked in the first 30 minutes of the video have the best chance of being answered as well. If you want to hear a bit more football talk about all the yellow cards, everything like that, the Know the Score podcast that I do with Luke Hemner every single Monday will be out tomorrow. Make sure you're subscribed to that channel. I'll leave a link above and the description. It's a lot of fun. It's an hour chatting football, chatting Premier League, non-FPL. If you want to hear us rant, then make sure you go and head over there as well. Thank you so much for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.